Hello, my name is Christopher Renstrom, and I'm your weekly horoscope columnist here on Astrology Hub. And this time, I wanted to talk to you about the Saturn Neptune conjunction taking place on February 20th. Now, what is a conjunction in astrology? A conjunction is when two planets are in the same place at the same time in the sky. You can almost think of a conjunction as a three-legged race. Where your leg is tied to somebody else's leg, and you both have to race forward against all these other people whose legs are tied to one another, and the first one over the finish line, of course, wins. But because not everyone racing is evenly matched, you might be with a slower person or a faster person, all sorts of hilarity ensues as you try to make your way to the finish line. Now, the same thing can hold true with the planets themselves. There are certain conjunctions that are really terrific, like, for instance, Mercury-Mars conjunction. Mercury is pretty speedy in its thinking, and Mars is very hands-on and action-oriented, and the two of them together can produce very fast action on the part of the personality, on the part of the person who has that conjunction in their horoscope. Other planetary conjunctions aren't so conducive, like, for instance, a Venus-Saturn conjunction. Venus is named after the Roman goddess of love and beauty. She wants to be flirty and seductive and charm people and have lots of fun. But when Saturn's around in a conjunction, he can be kind of cranky and icy and no fun to be around at all. So where Venus is trying to be flirty and charming, Saturn is rolling his eyes or poking holes in the things that she's saying, or maybe just sitting there silently with a glum expression on his face. So like I said, there are going to be certain conjunctions that are conducive and certain conjunctions that are going to be a bit challenging. So what happens when we have a Saturn-Neptune conjunction in the sky? Well, Saturn, as we all know, is the planet of tests, trials, and tribulations. It's also the planet of reality checks. It's the one who's always coming up with the reason why you can't do something, or why thinking such a thing is so impractical, far-fetched, and impossible. So that's kind of Saturn's character in general. When you put it next to a planet like Neptune, which is a planet of vision and a planet of imagination, a planet of hopes and a planet of yearning, what you have is this three-legged race going on between one planet, which is like, I know we can win, and let's go forward. And another planet saying, no, there's no way we can win. We're not that fast, and we're ill-matched. And don't you see there's lots of vole holes in the track, and we're going to trip and fall and break our necks. Okay, so that's an idea that you have with these two planets in the sky. And at first glance, it looks rather dreary and dismal, like, ew, a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Yuck. Because it's this idea of disillusionment. As we've said before in a previous episode, Neptune is the planet of illusion, and Saturn can be a planet that points out all the problems in the illusion. It's the reality check planet. But there's a bit more going on when these two planets are involved in a conjunction. Both planets have a great deal of depth and a great deal of profundity to them, but the path to understanding the wisdom that they have to offer is often through disillusionment and disappointment. So when you have a conjunction like this taking place in the zodiac sign of Aries, which is such an optimistic sign, it's the zodiac sign of the spring equinox, it's all about fresh starts and new beginnings. It's a zodiac sign where the sun itself is exalted, it's most celebrated, because the sun is seen as being the most heroic in the zodiac sign of Aries. It's a zodiac sign that's connected to saving people and rescuing them and doing the right thing. So when you have these two planets coming together in this sign, bringing their disappointment and their disillusionment to such an idealistic energy, it can feel a bit crushing. It can feel a bit like your hopes have been dashed. But that, in a way, is the entire point. What happens when we have a conjunction of Saturn and Neptune in a zodiac sign like Aries It's heroic, but not in the way that Aries is accustomed to being heroic. This isn't a knight in shining armor that's jumping on a white steed and running to someone's rescue, or a superhero that's flying through the air and saving you last minute from the jaws of disaster. This conjunction in this particular zodiac sign is more about getting in touch with the heroism inside, a heroism that you didn't think you had, maybe reconnecting to a faith or a belief or confidence. Again, a faith or a belief or a confidence that has been laid low, that has been disproved, that has perhaps even been debunked. This is where the conjunction of Saturn and Neptune in Aries works its own particular magic. An example that comes to mind is that moment in The Wizard of Oz. And if you know me, you know that one of my favorite stories of all time is The Wizard of Oz. But here I'm going to focus on this one particular moment in The Wizard of Oz. Dorothy and the Scarecrow, Tin Woodman and the Lion and Toto have gone and defeated the Wicked Witch of the West. They've been charged with the mission to bring back her broom, and they do, and they bring back the broom to the wizard. And they meet with the wizard in this vaulted hall full of fire, and the wizard is very majestic looking and has a booming voice and is really quite intimidating. But they're feeling really good that they have defeated this Wicked Witch of the West and brought back their broom. And Dorothy steps on forward and she presents the broom to the wizard. And the wizard looks at it and she says, "Now we want our wishes granted." The wizard said that if the Scarecrow wanted a brain, or if the Tin Woodman wanted a heart, or the Lion wanted courage, or if Dorothy wanted to go back home to Kansas, they were going to have to defeat the Wicked Witch of the West and bring back her broom as evidence of their victory. And so they've done this, and now they've arrived in the throne room to collect their due reward. And it's at that moment that Toto, who's been like getting into mischief, and that's all really Toto ever does in the story of The Wizard of Oz. Anyway, it's at that moment where Toto has disappeared and gone behind the throne. And they're talking to this wizard that's like, "Well, you know, I'll tell you when and if I want to grant these wishes," and these sorts of things. And Dorothy protests and said, "We kept our word and you keep yours." And the wizard's like, "Well," and of course, it's at that moment when Toto grabs the curtain and opens it. And we have, of course, that famous line, "Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain," which I always love. And basically, the great and powerful Oz is revealed to be a charlatan, a snake oil salesman from the Midwest who had hopped into a balloon and was advertising his cure-alls. And all of a sudden there was a wind that had taken him over the great desert that separates the world from Oz and landed him down in the Emerald City. And it was this sort of descent down into the Emerald City on this balloon that made all the people in the Emerald City think he was a great wizard, and they set him up as the great and wonderful Wizard of Oz. So there was this illusion that had been ascribed to the wizard, this man descending from the heavens. He must be a great wizard. And it's an illusion that the wizard also cultivated because he's in a foreign land. He doesn't know these people, and he doesn't know what's going to happen to him if he doesn't project this power and this authority. These are themes of Neptune in Aries, puffing up the chest and expressing a sort of bravado and a command. And so the great secret at the same time, because Neptune is the planet of illusionment and disillusionment, the planet of illusion and fraud, among its many different aspects and understandings. And so he has to project this, he has to fulfill this role. And he was doing it quite successfully until Dorothy and her friends returned with the witch's broom. And now he has to deliver. So he's exposed as a fraud. And Dorothy and the Scarecrow and Tin Woodman and Lion are completely distraught and disappointed. I mean, at first they can't believe their eyes. And then the realization begins to dawn that they've been fooled, that they've been lied to, that they've done the beckoning of a fraud, that this person can't possibly do these things. Okay, so this is the disillusionment part. This is the Saturn part. The wizard is exposed. And what happens here is that the wizard says, "Oh," in the film, the wizard says, "Oh, actually, I do have these gifts for you." The wizard's very quick on his feet. And they're like, "Oh, you do?" And the wizard says, "Scarecrow, here is a graduation certificate. And this is going to show that you have brains and you've had them all along. And the Scarecrow is like, oh, I do. And in the film, he like takes the certificate and he's like, E = mc squared, and goes through these formulas. He shows off that he has brains. And he turns to the Tin Woodman and he said, oh, you were searching for a heart, but don't you know that you've had a heart all along? And all you have to do is wear this medal and believe in your heart and it will beat again. And the Tin Woodman is like, oh, I do have a heart and I can feel it beating and I'm full of love and compassion. And the lion, I think he gives the lion a crown or a medal. I think he gives him a medal. He gives the Tin Woodsman a sort of heart badge to wear, and the lion, he gives a medal. And the lion is like very leonine. He's like, you know, how complimentary and flattery, and doesn't this medal look great on me? And of course I have courage. Now, the reason the wizard is able to do this is because the wizard isn't lying in this moment. And this is the rub of the Saturn Neptune conjunction, the irony, if you will. The wizard recognized something in Dorothy's three compatriots that they had never recognized themselves. After all, any sort of straw man who could outwit the Wicked Witch of the West, and the wizard himself had been thrown out of the western part of Oz by the Wicked Witch of the West. She overpowered him. She triumphed over him. He was very afraid of her. So any scarecrow who's walking and talking and forming sentences who could outwit the witch like that is obviously very smart. And any tin man with an axe who cared so deeply about his friends and who begins to rust whenever he cries clearly has a heart. And the lion, although he often makes a fool of himself, nevertheless was there for his friends during their face-off with the witch, and obviously he has courage. So it's a fascinating thing that's happening here. The illusion was really the illusion or the lies that the Scarecrow, the Tin Woodman, and the lion were telling themselves. The Scarecrow was telling himself, I'm not smart. The Tin Man was saying, I'm heartless. And the lion was saying, I'm a fraidy cat. And these were the lies that they were telling themselves. So the wizard, even though he's exposed as a fraud, reveals the truth in them, that they've had these qualities all along. And this is the curious thing and the revealing thing about the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. There is the illusion, there's the disillusionment. We're told all the time not to hope for something or yearn for something. We're only going to be disappointed. But oftentimes what we don't realize is that the hoping and yearning for something and the striving for it and the journey towards it, which includes disappointment and heartbreak and perhaps even despair, these are the things that actually activate these principles. They speak to our soul. And when you're talking about Neptune and even Saturn, you're talking about the soul. So this disillusionment actually reveals, but we wouldn't have seen the revelation had we not gone through the disillusionment or the disappointment itself. So in other words, what's being said here is you stop yourself short when you accept a limitation. When you say, I'm disappointed, despairing, I'm going to give up on this, I'm never going to do that again. I was wrong to have hoped for this. You've stopped yourself with that despair. You've stopped yourself with that disappointment. And by saying, now I'm going to be cynical or skeptical or jaded, and I'm never going to believe these things again, then you encase yourself in a tin chest without a heart in it. And what happens with this Saturn-Neptune conjunction is that going through the entire process of yearning and disappointment and heartbreak and the deepening and the profundity that those experiences bring, those experiences take you to a deeper and a more soulful part of yourself. Dorothy, as you might remember, is the only one who's not given something because Dorothy wants to be taken back home. And the wizard promises her that he is going to take her back home the next day because he's got a balloon and she's going to hitch a ride and they're going to go back home. But we all know that's not the way that works out. And that's why Dorothy's journey, apart from the journeys of the Scarecrow, Tin Woodman, and the Cowardly Lion, Dorothy's journey is more unique, and Dorothy's journey is more resonant to what we want to talk about today.
All right, my friends, we are just days away from the conjunction that astrologers on this platform have been talking about for years at this point. I'm talking about the Saturn Neptune conjunction that is happening at 0 degrees of Aries. In order to help you understand how this is impacting you personally, we have put together a free guide that you can download at astrologyhub.com/conjunction. And this is going to help you understand where it's happening in your chart and what that means for you. So you can go there now, download that. We're also going to put that link in the show notes. I hope you love it. And now back to the episode.
If you're born under Aries or you have Aries rising, this Saturn-Neptune conjunction in your own zodiac sign is going to have a very powerful impact on you. And it's not going to be an impact that you're going to really readily understand right away. The difficulty with having two planets like this in your own zodiac sign, forming a conjunction in your own zodiac sign, is that there's no distance on the experience. They're happening to you. And so you are identified with those energies. Okay, maybe if this conjunction were sextiling you or trining you, there would be some distance. You could say, okay, that's what that experience is. You could label the experience. You could observe the experience. You could maybe even step outside yourself and see what the effects are. Even a square would bring that about because there would be this friction between the conjunction and yourself. And that kind of friction can also bring a consciousness raising or an understanding of what's going on. But when the two planets are taking place in your own zodiac sign and they're acting upon you, then they are pushing your buttons. They are triggering all sorts of responses that you have in yourself. Now, the first thing that you might be dealing with during this period of time of this conjunction is that there might be a feeling like, I'm not good enough. I'm not up to this. And where that is coming from is the Saturn. Saturn, for instance, will highlight the defects or the shortcomings of any zodiac sign that it's traveling through. It will point out what's wrong with taking this approach, what's wrong with being this sign. Whenever you see Saturn in a zodiac sign, you want to ask yourself to get into the sort of Saturn headspace, what's wrong with being a Capricorn or what's wrong with being a Gemini? Okay, and what Saturn will also do is slow down or dampen the effect of the sign. For instance, Saturn in Gemini might find itself a bit slow on the uptake. I mean, Gemini is a Mercury ruled sign. It's about the mind moving very quickly. And a Saturn in Gemini might, for instance, find itself slow to figure out something, or it might stumble over its own words, or it might even suffer from overthinking. Okay, that might be an example. So when we have Saturn in the zodiac sign of Aries, a zodiac sign that's connected to courage and to taking action, you can see that Saturn in the zodiac sign of Aries might have an inability to take action. It might avoid confrontations. It might want to take an action, but then it sees the consequences of that action and how that could lead to more consequences and more actions. And then it becomes paralyzed by all of that. It becomes paralyzed by inaction. The courage of Aries might feel very slow or leaden when Saturn is traveling through it. You might begin to feel, what was I thinking? I don't have the courage to do this. I'm not brave in that way. I'm not particularly outstanding. All of those qualities that Aries wants to push for, which is courage, facing challenges, clambering over obstacles, powering through things. Saturn here will be like, the obstacle's too big, or I can't do this. It might bring a sense of helplessness or even hopelessness. All qualities that might be heightened by Neptune also in the sign, because Neptune can also be this feeling of hopelessness or helplessness, especially when it's tied to Saturn. Now, what's Neptune like when it's in your own zodiac sign? I've often said when I describe Neptune that Neptune will glamorize whatever zodiac sign it's passing through. It will show you all the beautiful luminous qualities of Capricorn or the beautiful luminous qualities of Leo. It mythologizes the story of that sign. And so Neptune in Aries, as we talked about in our last episode, mythologizes the idea of the hero and the rugged individual. Well, when Neptune is in your sign and you are experiencing it, for instance, you're an Aries and you're experiencing Neptune in your sign, what can also happen is this feeling of an empty space where a person used to be. And this is an odd and intriguing effect that Neptune seems to have on the people born under the sign that it happens to be in. They can almost feel like they're empty spaces. Jupiter, for instance, will make the person puff up the chest. But Neptune, if it's in your own sign, can make you feel very invisible, or that's not who you are. It's almost like an out-of-body experience in some way. And so you may either go in one of two directions when Neptune is in your zodiac sign. You might get incredibly vague and easily bewildered, or you might compensate for that by becoming more deliberate and more commanding because you're always questioning how sure you are or how confident you are about these things. So with a Saturn-Neptune conjunction taking place in the zodiac sign of Aries, that might bring a kind of, I think, imposter syndrome is what we call it. That people see you maybe as a confident and competent and gung-ho type of person, but that might not be the way that you see yourself at all. And because Saturn has joined Neptune in the sign, you might be aware of all the faults, all the foibles, all the things that you are not. And that can become an internal struggle. You may not believe that you have these qualities, like the Tin Woodman didn't believe he had a heart, or the Scarecrow didn't believe that he was smart enough, or the Lion didn't believe that he was courageous. You may not believe that you have these qualities that other people assign to you, or more challenging, you may believe that you don't have these qualities that people have put their expectations on for you. They're standing there, arms crossed, looking at you and saying, okay, you're such a hysterically funny comic, make me laugh. And you might be like on the spot and may have performance anxiety or something along those lines. So this might be something that's resonating with you right now with this particular conjunction. And of course, the story of the conjunction is to really lean into it. As we saw when I was describing the scene with the wizard, you have these qualities, but you may not believe it. You may not feel it. And so this disillusionment, this exposing while revealing journey may be something that's happening right now that leads you to connect to these qualities, but qualities that you're going to experience in your own unique and individual way. If you're born under Taurus or you have Taurus rising, this particular conjunction of Saturn and Neptune in the zodiac sign of Aries happens to be taking place in a very sensitive part of your solar horoscope. It's taking place in what we would call your solar 12th house. Now, the 12th house is a very complicated and very intriguing house in astrology with a very long and storied past and history. The 12th house is said on one hand to be the house of one's self-undoing or the house of secret enemies. Our modern day version of that would probably be a house of self-sabotaging patterns, a house where certain behaviors that have not served us in the past are going to be triggered by a particular transit or by a particular conjunction of planets that are taking place there. And that might bring about our own self-undoing and might become difficult for us. So that might be some of the flavor of what's going on here. The 12th house can also be a house where you go through great crises. You undergo very difficult things. And if you're born under Taurus or have a Taurus rising, you might have a sense of what it's like to have your house uprooted by a cyclone and carried someplace where you've never been before. You might have a sense of what it's like to face witches of the East and West who have it out for you and you have no idea why they have it out for you. Or you might have a sense of what it's like to be in a land where everyone talks about a great wizard only to realize that there's no wizard at all. So this can be a house where you experience these disillusionment and this disappointment, these difficulties that you are going through. And you might even feel in some way that you've been targeted, that the cosmos have gotten together. And like King Lear, where the gods are like boys who play with us for their sport, sort of thing. And that you seem to be the fly that they're trying to pull the wings off of. Yeah, that might be what you're feeling nowadays if you're born under Taurus or Taurus rising. But in the same breath, I want to say that the 12th house is also the house of the soul, not the spirit, the soul. And the 12th house is where we get to know and experience our soul on a very deep level, where we learn to connect to things that aren't to be found in the outside world. They're to be found through retreat. They're to be found by moving away from the outside world and turning our gaze inward. And sometimes this is the result of debacles or disasters, or sometimes this can be the result of no longer feeling connected to those external things that we thought would make us happy. Maybe we've come to the end of the road with a job that we had always wanted and we feel empty in it. Or maybe we make lots of money and there's nothing really more to be gained except buying more and more things that fill up an empty room or something along those lines. We've lost a connection to our soul, to that thing that makes us feel alive and rooted in who we are. Soulful experiences carry great meaning, but not always the words to explain what that meaning is. And I think that's the entire point of a soulful journey, is to experience the mystery of the soul without the ability to articulate, describe, or explain it. So if we return to the wizard's throne world with the Wizard of Oz, we know that Dorothy is supposed to climb into a balloon basket and sail away with the wizard, and he's going to take her home. And Toto, who has another mischievous moment, springs after a cat that he sees in the crowd that's gathered to say farewell to the wizard, who's going to fly away in his balloon. And he leaps out of Dorothy's arms, and Dorothy gets out of the balloon gondola and goes running after the dog. And of course, it's at that moment that the balloon lifts off and the wizard can't bring it back. He's flying away and he waves at everyone. He's like, goodbye, goodbye. And Dorothy's like, oh no, well, no. I'm like, how am I ever going to get home? And it's at this moment that a bubble descends and is revealed Glinda the good. In the book, it's a bit different. The wizard does indeed depart in a balloon because Toto chases a cat. And Dorothy is left alone and bereft and despairing. She breaks down and cries. And she's been pretty solid for a little girl who's been carried away in a house and dumped in the land of Oz and gone on all these adventures. She's been pretty rock solid, but it's at this moment that she completely despairs. And the palace guard says, well, there's a person you should see. And they're like, who should we seek out? Because they're always being told to seek out someone, seek out the wizard or seek out the wicked witch of the West and get her broom. And now they're being told to seek out Glinda. This is the only time that she appears in the book. It's at the end of the book. And so they have to go on a series of adventures to go and find Glinda. But as we know, the great question that's always asked is, Glinda points out that she's wearing these ruby slippers. In the book, they're silver slippers, and that she had the power to transport herself home all along, which makes everyone ask, well, why didn't, Glinda tell her at the beginning of this movie? Or why didn't someone clue her in if she had the power to take herself home all along? And that's the point of the 12th house. You have to go on the pilgrimage. You have to go on the journey. You have to go on the adventure. It's not a computer game where you vanquish enemies and score points and go up another level. It's going on this adventure, meeting people that you would never have met before, like, I don't know, a scarecrow and a robot or a tin man or a lion. I mean, when are you going to meet people like that? And facing down these different perils and obstacles, like the monsters that have the body of a bear and the head of a tiger, or a field of poppies where you fall asleep and will perish. You go on these adventures because it creates these ties to your comrades and it deepens you through your experience. You also use your ingenuity and your courage and your love for your companions. And this is the journey of the soul that, for instance, Hermeticists talk about, and certain Eastern religions talk about, that the soul is exiled and must go on a journey in order to be reunited with the cosmos that it had fallen from. But the soul can't just say, like, hey, I fell down here. The soul has to go on this journey. It has to find its way back. And that's the story of Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. She is the exiled soul that's finding her way back home. And so this I would offer to you as an idea of what's going on with this Saturn and Neptune conjunction. There may be disillusionments and disappointments. You may wonder, why am I on this road and where is it going? And why am I facing these things? But as you travel this road and as you face these different obstacles and challenges, you're going to find your soul deepening, that the impact or the effect that these events or situations are having on you is to make you a richer person in terms of your experience and in terms of your wisdom. And that's what makes a soul journey a true pilgrimage rather than a commute to work or going and spending 2 weeks in Europe. You go on this journey that has this tremendous impact on you on a deeper level, but it's not about showing you the easy way, and it's not about satisfying your desires. It's about you drawing on resources in yourself and developing a recognition of a quiet, maybe even sleeping part of yourself, an integral part of yourself that's been waiting to be woken up and to fill your life with a luminescence and a radiance. If you're born into Gemini or you have Gemini rising, this Saturn-Neptune conjunction in the zodiac sign of Aries is going to be beneficial to you. Now, the reason why it's going to be beneficial to you is because Aries forms a natural sextile to Gemini. Aries is a fire sign, Gemini is an air sign, and these are the two masculine or yang elements in astrology. It's all about being active and activated. Although Saturn and Neptune may carry with them the disappointment and the disillusionment, which is part of the component of their character, they are nevertheless stars that are true to guide your ship by. They will lead the way. And what this puts me in mind of is the beginning of Dorothy's journey after she leaves her house, which has been almost like smashed into awe. And though Saturn and Neptune may still carry with it the characteristics of disillusionment and disappointment, nevertheless, they are stars that you can surely steer your ship by. They're there for you. They're there to show you the way forward. And the way forward is aspirational. So in other words, whatever disappointments or disillusionments that you experience along the way are meant to rid you of old beliefs or old things you told yourself that have probably been limiting you rather than benefiting you. And of course, that comes from experiencing something for ourselves. And it's associated to journeys and it's associated to discovery. This is the part of the story of The Wizard of Oz where Dorothy emerges from her house and she meets the Munchkins. But in the book, it's told a bit differently. In the book, there are 4 witches of Oz. There is the Wicked Witch of the East and the Wicked Witch of the West. Okay, so they're along the equator. And then there's the Witch of the North, and there is the Witch of the South. The Witch of the North is an older woman who wears a conical hat and is dressed in a beautiful silvery robe and a gown. And she's with the Munchkins, and she approaches Dorothy and asks Dorothy certain questions about herself, like, who are you? What are you? Where did you come from? Was this your house? And so Dorothy answers those questions. And she's also the one who points out that Dorothy has done a great deed. She has performed a great heroic feat. And she's like, I have? And the witch says, yes, you have destroyed the Wicked Witch of the East. And Dorothy's like, I have? And she's like, yes, turn around, my dear. And you can see. And she sees these 2 feet wearing silver slippers in the book that are underneath her house. And she's completely horrified by this. And the Witch of the North is delighted. She's like, the Munchkin people want to show you their gratitude because you have defeated someone who has been very evil and has ruled their land with an iron fist. And Dorothy's like, I didn't mean to do this, and I'm so sorry. She's trying to wrap her mind around the fact that someone has died as a result of her house. And she's horrified by the entire experience. And what she wants to do, of course, is to get back home to Kansas. She's been carried by a cyclone and dumped here in Oz. And Oz is very beautiful. It's the opposite of Kansas. But she wants to get back. She wants to get back home. And she asks the Witch of the North if she can help her. And the Witch of the North says she cannot, that the only person that could help her is the wonderful Wizard of Oz. And Dorothy's like, well, where's he? And the Witch of the North says, he lives in the Emerald City. And she's like, Emerald City, Wizard, Oz, how do I get there? And she's like, you follow the Yellow Brick Road. And Dorothy's like, I just follow this road to the Emerald City. And the witch is like, yes. But before you go, I want you to have 2 things. And Dorothy's like, okay. And the witch goes and she takes the silver slippers and she places them on Dorothy's feet. And Dorothy is a little bit like, she's taking the slippers from someone who's dead. And also it's an older woman, but the slippers magically fit her. And then she says, and I also want to give you a kiss. And she kisses Dorothy on the forehead. And she says, this kiss will protect you from any and all dangers. And then Dorothy turns to her again and says, well, can't you just come with me? Or some of the Munchkins come with me? And the witch is like, no, you have to travel this road on your own. And she's like, and at least the Emerald City. And the witch says, yes. And the road goes through parts of Oz that are very beautiful and very lovely. And the road goes through parts of Oz that are very dark and they're very dangerous. But don't worry, because I've given you my kiss and you will always be protected. And so Dorothy goes on her way, not skipping. It's days. I think it's like over a week to get to the Emerald City. And she goes forward. And along the way, of course, as we know, she meets the Scarecrow, the Tin Woodman, and the Lion. And they become her compatriots. And this is very Gemini here, okay? Geminis never do anything alone if they can help it. None of the air signs do. They're always with other people and they coordinate with other people and they work as a team. You don't do anything by yourself. You want to work with other people here. And what happens is that it's the question, which is repeated. And remember, Gemini is ruled by Mercury. Mercury is curiosity. It's the inquisitive mind. And it's no coincidence, of course, that the first person she meets is the Scarecrow, who is want of a brain. He's looking for a brain and doesn't think he's that smart. She's conversant. She's asking, who are you? I'm a Scarecrow. I don't have a brain. Do you think the wizard could give me one? And she's like, yes. I'm a Tin Woodman who's heartless. Do you think the wizard could give me a heart? And Dorothy says, sure, come along with. And the Lion, I'm supposed to be the king of the beasts, but I'm a big failure and a fake. Do you think the wizard could give me some courage? And Dorothy says, yes. So Dorothy's not answering their question. She's not giving them these gifts. She's not making promises or assurances that they're going to get anything. She's like, I don't even know if he can send me back to Kansas. All I know is that I've been told to go see him. And so what's nice here is that you see someone who's been thrown into a completely different world, who has none of her familiar friends or people that she knows other than her dog Toto, and she makes friends. And this is what's lovely about this transit for Geminis, is like you may find yourself making friends right now who lack certain things or who long for something, who yearn for something, which parallels or perhaps mirrors what you're yearning and longing for. And you are all coming together and you're entering on this journey, or back in the medieval period would have been called a pilgrimage to a sacred site. I mean, back then it was a pilgrimage to a sacred site, but here it's a journey to a sacred site, which is the wizard at the center of the Emerald City. So this transit is really going to be talking about you forging friendships and alliances with people who are traveling with you. And they're not going to be the best of the best. They're not going to be like, I'm traveling with the cream of the crop. There's going to be a little bit an idea of the island of misfit toys, about the company you're keeping. If you remember Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, people who've been overlooked or neglected, or people who see themselves as lacking something. Your job isn't to answer that question or to give them the thing that they're looking for. Your job is to be their companion, like they're a companion to you. And this adventure, this journey that you're going on with this Saturn and Neptune conjunction may bring its disappointments and it may bring its moments of disillusionment, but at the same time, it's going to deepen you as a person. You're going to develop a very profound and deep appreciation for these new people in your life and these new places that you're going to. So it's in keeping with Uranus going back into Gemini. It just, Uranus back in Gemini changes the landscape. And so just as Dorothy finds herself in a whole different land, which is Oz, you'll find yourself in a whole different landscape. Maybe it's a different job or vocation, or maybe you move or relocate. And these are your friends, and they're here with you. You're making friends again that are going to be different from the ones you had before, and they're going to be much more in tune with who you are now and what you're looking for now. And in them, you'll see mirrored yourself. And this is the thing that's going to bring all of you close together as you journey with one another to wherever the Saturn-Neptune conjunction is leading you. If you're born under Cancer or you have Cancer rising, this Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries is going to be taking place at the top of your solar chart. It's going to be taking place in what astrologers call your midheaven. The midheaven is associated with ideas like destiny or career or high status. It's the highest point of the chart. Just like 12 noon marks the highest point in a clock, the midheaven marks the highest point in the sky when the sun is at the highest point. All right. And so this is supposed to be a luminous place, a place in which you are stepping into your authority. You're sitting on the throne. You're taking command of your situation. And this is what this conjunction talks about. And so it's about you taking command of your situation. That might be taking command at work. That might be taking command of your life. That might be you stepping into a position of authority where other people are looking to you to guide them or to rule them or to govern them. So this is a place of prominence and great responsibility. And so the natural question is going to be, how are you going to govern? How are you going to rule in this position? And how comfortable are you with it? Cancer is parental by nature. We know that the zodiac sign of Cancer is associated with the idea of the good mother. That's because here in the Northern Hemisphere, which is where Western astrology originates, Cancer is the zodiac sign that's associated to the summer solstice, the beginning of the season of abundance. And so Cancer is seen as the good mother, the caring, nurturing, loving mother. And so as a Cancer rising, you're used to that idea in terms of a parental role. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be a parent to play this role. What I'm talking about are the ideas of sheltering, nurturing, caring, supporting, cultivating. These are things that as a Cancer or Cancer rising, you have quite naturally. Your family is very important to you. Your close friends are very important to you. And being there for them and nurturing them, protecting them, sheltering them, supporting them, encouraging them like a parent, these are the things that are going to be very important. But sometimes when we step into a role of authority, things are being asked of us that aren't going to translate so easily into the idea of sympathy, care, nurturing, providing, and sheltering. Sometimes we hire people or we fire people. Sometimes we have to get tough with someone. Sometimes we have to make decisions that are going to be very unpopular, but might still be right. So there can be a loneliness to taking on a position of authority, something in which everyone thinks you're really great at it until you're actually doing it. And then they're like, oh, I didn't know this person was such a bitch all along, or something along those lines. Excuse my French. They begin like, oh, I thought you were different, and now you're just like every other wretched boss that I had, or something along those lines. Basically, a lot of times people will project feelings about their parent onto someone who is in a position of authority or a position of leadership. And so the big question for you during this period of time when Saturn is conjunct Neptune in your solar midheaven is a question that's asked early in the story of The Wizard of Oz. And that question is, are you a good witch or a bad witch? And so that's the great question that you're facing. In the story of The Wizard of Oz, there are 4 witches of Oz, and they really set up with the axis points. You have a wicked witch of the east and a wicked witch of the west. You have a good witch of the north. She's the northern star, basically a star that you steer your ship by. And then there is a good witch of the south, and that is Glinda. She is the witch of the south, and she is the last person that Dorothy meets in the story of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. She doesn't show up early like she does in the film. She doesn't show up until the last few pages of the book. And this idea of, am I being good or am I being bad? So you may feel during this period of time very exposed, very much weighed down by people's expectations. And what kind of effect is that going to have on you? Are you going to be one of the wicked witches, which is being very tyrannical and telling people what to do and enslaving them, like the Wicked Witch of the West enslaves the winged monkeys with the golden cap? Are you going to be that type of a leader who feels very much like you have to do the things that you have to do because that's the only way to get things done? Or are you going to be more benevolent, like the good witches are? But what's interesting about both of the good witches, the Witch of the North and Glinda, is that they don't do the work for Dorothy at any part of this story. They will give Dorothy protection. They will give Dorothy support. Glinda, in her last great act of returning Dorothy home, cannot do that until Dorothy has gone through her journey and really recognizes what this whole story has been about. Before then, she wouldn't have been able to do it. There wouldn't have been that bond that Dorothy has with her shoes. It's the fact that she has journeyed in these shoes that connects her to the ability to call upon the power of the shoes that she had been carrying or stepping on all along. So that idea of what would be a good witch, what would be a good leader, it's benevolent, but it's also recognizing that people have to take the journey on their own. You can't do it for them. It's guidance, but it's not telling them what to do or how to do it, because they have to understand that. They have to learn that for themselves. But at the same time, they must still be given direction, whether the direction is follow the yellow brick road and go to the Emerald City. And that in itself is Neptunian. It's like, well, why would this good witch say go to the Emerald City when the wizard is a fraud? Because she knows in her infinite good witch wisdom, that's a very important key in the story of Dorothy, that she needs something at this point early on in the journey to pin her hopes on. And that when those hopes are dashed is when she's going to recognize her own agency, that she can do this. And as someone taking over a leadership position, you may be making the transition from a child to an adult. And one of the big things when you transition into that position is recognizing how people need to have their own agency, how they need to understand who they are and to work in consort, and that you are there to give direction and to give guidance in order to get the job done. This could apply to you if you're leader of your block party or the PTA or a group or a congregation. People are looking to you. And are you telling them what to do? Are you controlling them? Are you getting the things out of this that you want to get out of it? Or are you putting their interests ahead of yours in the regard of leading and guiding them so that all together you can bring about the result? Good rule depends on the people as much as it does on the person in charge. And if you're a person in charge, people aren't always going to be on your side all the time. And in some regard, you have to take that. You have to be able to take that, withstand that, and still try to bring them around to the way that you see things, give them guidance, and also be open to the fact that maybe your judgment call was wrong and theirs was right, and to listen to them and to follow what they're saying. So this idea of stepping into a role of leadership may be at different times disillusioning or disappointing or even lonely, which are all things that the Saturn Neptune conjunction can bring. But at the same time, it's going to deepen you as a person. It's going to make you more empathetic to the people that you're working with. And when you're empathetic to the people that you're working with and you see them as being part of you, and yet your direction is for their welfare, that's when you truly become a leader. If you're born under Leo or you have Leo rising, this Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries is going to be very beneficial to you. The reason it's going to be so beneficial to you is because Leo is a fire sign, just like Aries is a fire sign, and so they create between the two signs a natural trine, a natural understanding. Earlier in this broadcast, I was talking about how people born under Aries are going to have a difficult time with Saturn and Neptune in their sign because the two planets sit on them or rest on them in their own sign. Okay, the two planets are basically in their face, for lack of a better way of putting it. So there's no distance, there's no perspective on understanding it. But because you're Leo, which is a fire sign, and the Saturn-Neptune conjunction is taking place in Aries, which is a fire sign, there's some distance on it. You can see what that conjunction is about. And so there's something there's guidance to be gained by following these stars in the sky, and you can see that. It's not happening at you, it's not in your face. You can see where they're leading. You don't know where they're going, but you can see where they're leading. It's like the Star of Bethlehem moves through the sky and the wise men follow it, and it stops, and that's where they're supposed to go. Well, in many ways, you will be feeling like you're answering a call in your life. And this Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which creates like a star energy, a single star energy, there's this calling that you're going to be feeling in your life. And so you may feel very much a restlessness right now, like I need to pull up stakes and leave where I am, that my real life is taking place somewhere else in this world, that I'm not finding who I am where I am. I'm longing, I'm yearning to be somewhere else. And that's very reminiscent of the beginning of the film, The Wizard of Oz, when Dorothy sings Over the Rainbow, one of the great anthems, one of the great songs that the Oz series has given us. We have Over the Rainbow from The Wizard of Oz, we have Home from The Wiz, and we have Defying Gravity from Wicked. These three films have given us these classic songs. And so there's a calling here. There's a calling that maybe Over the Rainbow is where I need to be. If birds can fly, why can't I? Sort of thing. So there's a longing and there's a yearning that Dorothy feels at the beginning of the film. And it's something that you may very well be feeling right now in your own life. That what I'm looking for isn't to be found in this black and white world of Kansas, that I'm looking for the Technicolor world of Oz, and you're going to want to follow that. And you should. This is something that is beckoning to you. But there's also another phrase that you should remember during this time, which I think is a very important phrase and a very leonine phrase. And that phrase, you might be familiar with it, is wherever you go, there you are. You may go to an exotic place. You may switch jobs. You may leave a relationship or start a relationship. A whole new world may open up for you. But wherever you go, no matter whether it's foreign or domestic, wherever you go, there you are. And so everything that you are is going to follow you to this place. So this isn't an escape. This isn't leaving behind. And if those are the reasons you're doing it, those are the things that you will deal with on this journey. Because whenever you take a journey like this, you bring everything that you are along with you. You bring your hopes and your yearnings and your aspirations, and you bring your fears and you bring your fear of confrontation. I don't want to confront this. I don't want to think about this. Scarlett O'Hara is another day. All of those things are going to trundle along with you on this journey. And so as you go and you travel here and you find yourself in a different place, and you may find the same things about yourself showing up in this new relationship, or showing up in a new job, or showing up in a new country or culture. The point is for you to embrace and to meet these parts of yourself. That it's not that a calling is not permission to abandon all your responsibilities. A calling is a feeling of being called out into the wilderness, into a place where you don't know all of these things, and to take yourself with you, because ultimately, in the story of The Wizard of Oz, it's a story of self-discovery. Dorothy has to go on this journey to find herself. When she says at the end of the film, next time I decide to follow my heart's desire, I won't go any further than my own backyard, which is sweet and funny and charming. But what it's really talking about is I had to lose myself to find myself. I had to lose my home. I had to lose my way to give these things value to me. I didn't know how much Uncle Henry and Aunt Em mattered to me until I found myself transported to an entirely different world, and they weren't a part of my life. And so, although that sounds like, well, maybe I shouldn't leave where I am right now. Is that what you're saying, Christopher? It's like, no, if you feel leaving, and that could be physical, or that could be metaphorical or psychological or symbolic, this journey, you're answering this to find who you are. And many times when we find who we are in a different location or a different place or a different context, we find those qualities of ourselves that we had neglected, that we had denied, that we might have taken for granted or said, I'm bored. And we find them wake up. They come to life. They speak to us in a way that they wouldn't have spoken to us and hadn't been speaking to us when everything was familiar. And that might be your dreams, that might be your talents, that might be your conscience, that might be your heart. But what it definitely will be is a journey to yourself, a journey where you will see yourself for who you are. And that might leave you feeling at times a little bit critical or a little down on yourself, but don't be too critical and don't be too down on yourself. The whole part is to see parts of yourself you wouldn't have seen in your current context. And when you see this, to embrace them like long lost friends. If you're born under Virgo or you have Virgo rising, this Saturn Neptune conjunction in Aries is going to be taking place at a very sensitive angle of your solar horoscope. It will be taking place in the house of sex, death, and other people's money. Now, this is a house that I spoke about in the previous episode quite a bit. Basically, it's a house that's connected to those taboo thoughts and feelings that take place inside of ourselves, the things that we really don't like to talk about and are unlikely to bring up at the dinner table. The idea of sex and sexuality can be a very private affair or a very private situation, something that you might feel very proud about or very ashamed of, whatever your perspective might be on that. And that might be a situation you might be facing right now. There might be an issue with death that could either be physical, like the loss of someone in your family or a friend or something along those lines, or it could be the fear of loss. A lot of times, planets in the 8th house can deal a lot with the fear of loss more than the loss itself. And certainly fear of mortality or anything that makes us shiver in that mortal sort of way, send a shiver down the spine, is something that we will definitely react to and withdraw into ourselves. And then, of course, there's the idea of other people's money. And that's money that you owe others or that other people owe you, as well as joint finances and things like that. But the context that I really want to explore with you, talking about the Saturn and the Neptune conjunction in this part of the chart, really what I wanted to bring up is the idea of fear and how fear might be driving certain behaviors that you might be experiencing right now in your life. Saturn is a planet of fear. It's a planet that we regard as being associated to our insecurities, our anxieties, our depression. But Saturn really talks about what we are afraid of the most and how that fear paralyzes us, or how that fear imprisons us in some sort of regard. And when Neptune is conjunct Saturn at this particular angle, it might bring with it, instead of hope and yearning, hopelessness and a helplessness. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with the book version of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, which was published in 1900. When Dorothy is told by the wizard in the Emerald City that he can help her only if she kills the Wicked Witch of the West, and Dorothy has this discussion with him. She's like, how can you expect me to do something like that? And the wizard replies, well, you've killed the Wicked Witch of the East. And she was like, well, that was a complete accident. It was entirely by accident that happened. I'm like 9 or 10 years old. I mean, I'm a little girl. You're a great man who expected me to do such a thing like this. And he says, bring me back the broom of the Wicked Witch of the West, and I will send you back home to Kansas. And so this is a very important part of the story, because up until this time, when the house lands in Oz, it's carried to Oz by a cyclone, and it lands in the land of the Munchkins. She's always been told, follow the yellow brick road, it will take you to the wizard. And so she does that dutifully. She goes through various adventures with her friends, the Scarecrow, Tin Woodman, and Lion. They arrive at the wizard, expecting the wizard to grant them their wishes. Here's your brain, here's your heart, here's your courage. Dorothy, here's a one-way ticket back to Kansas. And instead they get charged with a mission, which is to kill somebody, and to kill someone who is frightening and has done a lot of harm and has done a lot of evil. At this point, the story changes. They've been following the yellow brick road, but there is no yellow brick road to the witch's castle in the West. They have to find it. And the way that they find it is by following the setting sun. And this 8th house is associated with the time of day when the sun is beginning to set. And the setting sun was always associated with death, with the lands of death. Any sort of great hero, whether it was Odysseus or Aeneas, knew that you followed the sun to the west, either on foot or by ship, and that's where you would come to the gates of the underworld and you would descend down into the underworld. And so in that same fashion, Dorothy and her friends followed the sun to the west to descend down into the underworld, to conquer the Wicked Witch of the West. And what happens here is fascinating. Like the film, she's abducted. The flying monkeys who do the bidding of the Wicked Witch of the West come and they take the Scarecrow and pull him apart limb from limb and throw the straw all over the place. They take the Tin Woodman and throw him off a cliff where he is crashes and bent and mangled and can't do anything. And they take Dorothy, they take Toto, but they also take the lion. Okay, and so what's fascinating about this is that they take the 3 living creatures. The Scarecrow isn't alive in a flesh and blood sense. The Tin Woodman isn't alive in a flesh and blood sense. They take Dorothy, who is, and Toto, who is, and they take the lion, who is. And so they take them to the Wicked Witch of the West, and she imprisons them. And this is a low point. This is a nadir, that all hope is lost. And what happens here, and how this pertains to Virgo, is that Dorothy enters into a servitude. Okay, the Wicked Witch of the West turns Dorothy into her personal servant. Actually, it's really like her personal slave. She orders Dorothy to clean things, to work things, to take care of the castle. And as she does this, she observes Dorothy, and she's trying to figure out, how am I going to get those silver shoes? In the book, there's silver shoes and not ruby shoes. And she's trying to figure out how she's going to do that, because the silver shoes are very powerful. In the book, the witch possesses a golden cap, which allows her to enslave and command the flying monkeys, who are not bad. They're actually good, but they have to obey whoever wears the cap. And in the story, the Wicked Witch of the West wears it. And she's as heartless with them as she is with Dorothy and the Cowardly Lion. So as Dorothy performs her chores, like I was saying, the witch watches her and follows her around. She has one eye, and the other eye is covered by a patch. And so one day, Dorothy is taking a bath and she's left her slippers outside the bathtub. And the witch grabs one of the slippers and says, "I've got a slipper." And Dorothy grabs the other slipper and holds on to it. And she's like, "How could you do that?" And she's like, "I've got one slipper, my dear, and soon I will have the other." And so again, Dorothy is this servant. She doesn't understand why the witch is talking about her shoes being powerful. She's doing the witch's beckoning. She sneaks out and feeds the lion who's being starved. The witch wants to make him more ferocious by starving him. And she's bedraggled and she's completely lost her light. She's completely accepted, this is going to be my life from now on. I'm just going to be this witch's servant. And that's all I will ever amount to. And that's going to be my existence from now on. No one's going to come and save me. No one's going to come and help me. And this is the Saturn in Aries. There's no hero. There's no one who's going to come and save you. And the Neptune in this guise is very despairing. And so Dorothy becomes this servant. And so in a similar sense, you may be feeling in your life some kind of servitude, that maybe you're serving a partner, maybe you're working a job that is thankless to you, maybe there are circumstances in your life in which the obligations and the responsibilities are so heavy that they've crushed the hope out of you or the light out of you, and you may feel like you're turning into this servant, that you're becoming more servile. And for anyone born under Virgo or who has Virgo rising, this is the greatest fear, to be completely exploited, to be completely under the thumb of someone else, to be beholden to someone financially. And so the fears may be running roughshod right now. They might be very powerful right now. And there might even be at times a sort of hopelessness that comes as a result because of the conjunction of these two planets. But what happens in this is there's an interesting event. The Wicked Witch of the West turns an iron bar invisible on the floor, so Dorothy can't see it. And Dorothy has been scrubbing the kitchen down. The witch is feeding herself and she has no table manners. And then she feeds the monkeys and they definitely don't have any table manners. And Dorothy has to wait on them and scrub down the dishes and the floor and the counter and all these sorts of things. And so she's carrying this bucket of ugly, dirty water and a scrubber, and she trips over this bar that she didn't see. And she falls down and lands on her knees and hurts herself. It really hurts. And of course, the other silver shoe flies off. And the Wicked Witch grabs the shoe and she holds the two of them together. And she says, "I have your shoes." And Dorothy, I swear she must have been born with a Taurus moon or something like that. Dorothy is so furious that the witch has taken her shoes that she grabs the first thing in reach, which is this bucket of like dirty, hideous smelling water, and she throws it at the witch. It's an hysterical moment in the book. And the witch, who's always careful to carry an umbrella, she's never seen without an umbrella, is like shocked, and then she begins to melt. This is the one thing that the witch always guarded against. And Dorothy, in this moment, has destroyed the Wicked Witch of the West, and she's freed herself from servitude. She's freed the lion from servitude. She frees the monkeys from their servitude and goes and rescues the Scarecrow and Tin Woodman, and they head back to the Emerald City. But the point that I want to make before that is, through this feeling of, through this servility, through this service, through this enslavement, being told what to do and demanded and commanded, Dorothy gave up who she was. She has been captured by the witch, and she's lost all faith in herself and all faith in life. And she's all ready to be a scrubbing maid or scullery maid or whatever they call them for the rest of her life. She's resigned herself to this. And it's only when the witch snatches the second shoe. And the shoes represent the power within Dorothy. Dorothy doesn't know that right now. All she knows is, "That's my damn shoe, you witch." She throws the water. And so it's like, but what happens in this moment is that it's her possession. It belongs to her. Her self-worth belongs to her. Her empowerment belongs to her. She doesn't know that's what the shoes are holding, but she knows that shoe belongs to me. I'm taking it back. And so this may be something that comes out of this Saturn Neptune conjunction. There may be a feeling in your life of servitude and accepting where you are. There's no hope of escape or anything like that. And then something may happen that flips the switch, that makes you throw the dirty bucket of water and say no, and that secures your release and brings you together with, who you are. And so in a Neptunian fashion and a Saturn and Aries fashion, it's not the conquering of fear through I faced my fears and went through this trial and tribulation. It's a little girl pissed off that her second shoe that is bright and silver has been taken from her. And it may be something as simple as that causes your rage or anger, which is Aries, remember, is Mars ruled. That may be the very thing that turns the tables and secures your release. If you're born under Libra or you have Libra rising, this Saturn-Neptune conjunction is going to be taking place in your solar house of partnership. As a Libra, you know all about partnerships. Libra is the zodiac sign of partnerships. But this isn't just your spouse. It can be you partnering with someone in business, you partnering with someone in a creative collaboration. Anyone who comes into your life is pretty much regarded as a partner and is just as important as a spouse, even if they aren't your spouse. So this one-on-one partnering that Libras do is something that's very important, that's very essential to the sign. All air signs involve people in their lives because air sign is the element of relationship. Air signs rarely, if ever, do things alone. They're not happy alone. They're happiest when there are people in their lives, people that they can bounce ideas off of, people where they combine forces, or people that come together as a team or a group. So with Saturn and Neptune forming conjunction in the zodiac sign of Aries opposite you, there can be something about this partnering experience, something about the partner themselves, because I'm under the impression that planets crossing over the seventh heaven actually talk about the people who are coming into your life, not just a one person. There may be something about the people coming into your life who have some sort of problem, who have some sort of defect, who have some sort of issue. And the reason why I describe it this way is that Saturn will often highlight the fallibilities of a zodiac sign, the parts of the sign that are being shown as being weak or is a shortcoming or a fault, or where aspects of the sign have been muted or maybe even repressed as an energy. Saturn can be a very leaden type of planet, and so it can slow things down and it can dim the light. And so there might be people that you're in relationship with or association with or friends with or just hang out with who are going through maybe something in their life that they experience as being very burdensome or very difficult, where they might feel like they aren't up to the task at hand, where they might not feel like they're very able or capable or willing. And at the same time, that Neptunian element is there as well. You might feel very drawn to this person, very much wanting to help this person out, help this person to discover that strength in themselves that they don't feel like they have. And this may be something that's a bit familiar to you, and it may be something that you have recently resolved not to repeat again in your life. That, in other words, you're not going to go to the rescue of anyone. You're not going to try to come up with the answers that someone needs to find for themselves. And so as a Libra, you might have drawn a circle around yourself or a boundary around yourself that I'm not going to do this, that people have to fend for themselves, and I have to look out after my own interests, which is something that Libras can want to do if they've gone through a very difficult time, but they can also find it very hard to do if they're alone. There's always that instinct to bond or be with someone else, to join forces with another person. Now, the part of the Wizard of Oz that is brought to mind just describing these types of qualities is the character of the Tin Woodman. Of all of Dorothy's companions, there's the Scarecrow, the Tin Woodman, there's the Lion that she meets along the Yellow Brick Road. Of all of her own companions, the Tin Woodman is the one who has the fullest backstory. We're given a whole narration of his life, a biography of his life, And we don't really have much of that with the scarecrow or the lion. The reason we don't have it with the scarecrow is because he was literally born the day that before he met Dorothy. He was created the day before he met Dorothy, and the lion has just been a roving lion in the jungle or whatever. But it's the Tin Woodman who has a backstory, who has a past, something he's trying to get back to. And this parallels Dorothy's own wanting to get back to in her life. She wants to get back home, and the Tin Woodman wants to get back to his love. In fact, the story of the Tin Woodman is even more detailed than the story of Dorothy's. Essentially, what it is that the Tin Woodman used to be a man of flesh and blood, and he had fallen in love with a Munchkin girl, and they were betrothed to be married. And the Munchkin girl had a mistress that she served, her boss. She was employed by the mistress of a house who didn't want to lose the Munchkin girl. The Munchkin girl was very reliable. She would fetch things for the mistress of the house and do her bidding. And so the mistress, afraid that the Munchkin girl would marry this very handsome woodchopper who's really good with his hands and he can build things like houses and stuff, she goes to the Wicked Witch of the East and she shares her plight with the Wicked Witch of the East. And the Wicked Witch of the East says, if you give me a couple of goats and a cow, I'll take them out for you. So the Wicked Witch of the East was kind of like, I don't know, this kind of like mafiosa type or whatever. She's like, for the price of 2 goats and a cow, I'll take the guy out. And so the woman is like, gladly. And so what the Wicked Witch of the East does is that she enchants the axe of the Tin Woodman. And so when the Tin Woodman is out chopping wood one day, the axe flies out of his hand and it lops off his arm. And blood comes spurting out and he's like horrified. And he's like, oh my goodness, that's the end of me. And very quickly, other people hear his cries and they come and they grab the arm in the woodman and they take him to a tinsmith. And the tinsmith builds a tin arm for the woodman that he can move as long as he keeps it oiled. And he returns to chopping wood. Actually, he's chopping wood to build a house that he wants built to have done by the time he marries his fiancée, the Munchkin girl. They can move into this house. That's why he's working on this house. And he's chopping away day and night. And so that doesn't work. And the Wicked Witch of the East is like, well, that will never do. And she enchants the axe again, and the axe goes flying out of the Tin Woodman's hands as he's chopping, and it chops off the other arm. And he cries out, and his friends are like there immediately. And they're like, maybe if we pressed it to your shoulder, we could sew it back together. And the tinsmith is like, no, it's just like the other arm. I'll build for you an arm out of tin. And so now he's got 2 tin arms that are actually stronger than his natural arms were. And so he goes back to work on this house, and the Wicked Witch of the East, not to be foiled, enchants the axe again, and the axe lops off his 2 legs. And so it's kind of like Monty Python's Holy Grail here, the Black Knight. It's like, it's only a flesh wound. He's hopping around but anyway, the Tin Woodman's kind of doing that. And they come back and they take him to the tinsmith, and the tinsmith builds him 2 tin legs. And so again, he's like stronger than he's ever been. And he thinks this looks gallant and all sorts of things. And finally, he's chopping, and the Wicked Witch of the East is furious at this point. She enchants it one final time, and the axe splits him right down the center of his body, just right in 2, from the bottom of the neck down the torso. And he's split in 2, and his head's hanging on one side of the body. And so they go and they remove the head, which is preserved, and which in one of the following Oz books, the Tin Woodman actually has a whole conversation with his head that he meets later on, but that's getting ahead of ourselves. They remove the head somehow, but the heart has fallen out and bled dry before the Tin Woodsman could construct the chest. And so the Tin Woodman constructs a chest and a head. And so the body's been split open, the heart falls out, the Tin Woodman bleeds out, and the tinsmith can't save the heart. He can replace the chest and he can replace the head, which he does. And at that time, the Tin Woodman has been completely transformed. He's a thing of metal and no longer a human being. And when he learns that his heart fell on the ground and bled out, he realizes that he has no heart anymore. And that when the Munchkin girl comes to see him and plead with him, he doesn't want anything to do with her. He doesn't have any feeling at all. He's a heartless thing. And so it's when he's chopping wood that there's a rain and he rests, and that's how Dorothy finds him. She was looking for a place to stay that night, and it was the Tin Woodman's house, and outside the house was the Tin Woodman rusted, and she gets the oil can and brings him back to life. So as I said, there's this whole backstory. And so the Tin Woodman is convinced that he cannot love, that he has no love, that he's completely heartless. And they hear Dorothy and the Scarecrow hear his story, and they're like, what a sad and awful story. But yet, as they journey with the Tin Woodman, he's really Marsy, okay, because he's the only one of the companions who actually has a weapon, which is an axe. And when they are fighting leopards and wild animals, the Tin Woodsman protects them. He's the one who protects the party. He's naturally heroic. But yet, when they walk along the road, which takes days to get to the Emerald City, and he accidentally steps on an insect, he weeps. He starts to cry. And Dorothy's always like, you can't cry, because if you do, you'll rust. And he's like, oh, you're right. And so Dorothy wipes away the tears and keeps him from rusting. So he has no heart, but yet he cries. But when he cries, he might rust. And so, as you can tell, he's kind of like a neurotic mess, the Tin Woodman. But the reason why I bring this up is because the Tin Woodman is completely convinced that he has no heart, that he's lost it, and that he can never be with the love of his life again. And that's where he's gone. And what's fascinating about this, and what you may discover in your relationship or friendships or collaborations, you may be dealing or listening to a lot of personal issues that people have where they feel like they don't have something. They don't have the love, they don't have the genius, they don't have the creativity, they don't have the financial acumen, they don't have the means. And you may be drawn to their plight, but more than drawn to their plight, you may be drawn to their hope. Okay, because Neptune's here. You may be drawn to the fact that they're struggling with something that's a deficit, something that they don't have, but they hope and they yearn. And you may be so drawn to it that maybe what you feel, which might be a hardness in your heart or a wariness or a suspicion, a disillusionment that you've experienced perhaps recently, that's why the walls are up or the boundaries are there, you may experience as a result of hanging out with this person, working with this person, socializing with this person, you may experience a dissolution of the disillusionment. In other words, you may discover that you were the one who had the hardened heart, maybe, or the hardened stance, or a more skeptical or suspicious attitude, or maybe even a show me. My trust has been stomped on so many times. Show me. And you may feel by being with this person who's yearning for something that they don't have, you may feel a dissolution of your own disillusionment, an opening up again of your own heart. And that might be the effect of either a relationship or association that exists right now, or one that you may soon be exposed to. And there may be something about that person's story and the things that they've been telling themselves. And you might find their story moving, and you might be in a position to say to this person, but you have a heart, or you have this creativity, or you have this genius. And in that moment, you might be able to help this person recognize something about themselves that they didn't believe that they had. And in turn, you may come to see or to recognize something about yourself that you thought was lost or guarded or put away somewhere on a back shelf. You may find yourself recognizing something about yourself that's been hidden away that now comes to the front and goes on to transform you and your relationships from now on. If you're born under Scorpio or you have Scorpio rising, this Saturn Neptune conjunction in Aries takes place at a very peculiar angle of your solar horoscope. It takes place in that part of your solar chart that deals with health, work, and service, with a job that you do. And what might be taking place here is you may be questioning what you're doing for a living. Now, part of that might be you don't feel as connected to it as you once did. Part of it might feel like that you took on this position because of what I call Scorpio's issue with golden cage syndrome. Scorpio is a zodiac sign that can have very deep anxieties about money and about finances. It sits opposite Taurus in the zodiacal circle. And Taurus is very much about working and producing and money and financial livelihood. And really, Taurus, even of all the earth signs, but I think pretty much of maybe even of all the zodiac signs, has the most laid back, relaxed attitude about money. Does Taurus get concerned if money's not coming in like it should be and things like that? Sure. But at the same time, Taurus is always very careful to feather its nest, to provide for itself. It's worked out the contingency plans. It's put together the money. It's really has a very relaxed attitude about money. And it basically comes from the idea that Taurus is associated with that time of year when gardens begin to spring to life. So the idea of working the land, of planting seeds and cutting back dead growth and making things grow, this is in the Taurian DNA, even if a Taurus has like a brown thumb rather than a green one. Scorpio, which sits opposite because it's associated with the heart of autumn here in the Northern Hemisphere, which is where Western astrology originates from. Scorpio has a fear of being without money. The heart of autumn is when all of that beautiful, robust, those gorgeous fruits and vegetables and meat and things like that, which was abundant in the summer, has all gone away. The plants they're not blooming at all. They've gone to seed, the leaves have changed their leaves. And so Scorpio always carries within it a kind of fear of scarcity or of being without. And financial issues can trigger that in a Scorpio. So a lot of times what a Scorpio will do is that if they follow their natural impulses to what they want to do in life, it's great, it's wonderful. But if they don't, if they've been rejected from the things they wanted to do, or they were not recognized or appreciated or celebrated, Scorpios can really take rejection very deeply and very hard. They will set themselves up in a business situation, a financial situation, in which everything is taken care of. It may not be the job of their dreams, but it's a job that's got great benefits. It's a job that is protected, where they feel very secure. It's what I call the golden cage syndrome. It's to the outside, everyone's like, oh, wow, you have such a great job. But for the Scorpio, there can be a feeling of, yeah, but it's not really what I'm about, or this isn't what I really wanted to do with my life. And what can happen with Scorpios is that you can get to a point where you're going further and further away with what you wanted to do in your life and more to this job that's been taken for security, or it protects you, or it shelters you in some way. And this is what the Saturn and the Neptune conjunction is going to address. The story of The Wizard of Oz involves a lot of balloons and a lot of bubbles. If you're familiar with the film, Glinda flies around in a bubble, and the wizard descended from a balloon, and when he's ready to leave Oz, he ascends in a balloon. And balloons and bubbles are very much associated with Neptune. Okay, the idea of like you're living in a bubble, or there is a financial bubble, that you're living in something which is a myth, or it's falsely inflated. It's not real. That bubble can burst. Or ballooning sales expand, and you think that you're set for life, and then they go through a downturn and you find yourself left high and dry. So the idea of balloons and bubbles, of illusion and disillusionment, is very much something that's associated with Neptune. And Neptune's job isn't to rip off your rose-colored glasses and stomp them into the ground and say, wake up to reality, and that's not even Saturn's job. The Neptune-Saturn conjunction together, its job is to really address your soul. Are you doing something in your life where you feel soulless? Are you doing something in your life that might have begun with great purpose, but it's lost its way to some degree? And what this kind of puts me in mind of is, if that's true of your working situation or even of your living situation, do you feel like you're in a place where you can just leave and just leave, stop doing it, or just go and find something else? And this parallels, if you will, the story of the wizard in The Wizard of Oz. The wizard ends up in Oz much like Dorothy does, victim of the wind. He is a snake oilsman at a circus and he's performing and he's gone up in a balloon and people are like, oh, they've never seen such a sight. And he's waving to them and things like this. And all of a sudden the wind picks up and it carries his balloon. It snaps the rope of the circus and it carries his balloon out of America and over a great, large, vast desert, and it lands him in the center of the land of Oz, in the city of Oz. And when the citizens of Oz see him descending in his marvelous balloon, they think it's like Deus Ex Machina. The god is descending. And they're like, oh, this must be a very great and wonderful man. This must be a very great and wonderful wizard. And so he shows up. He doesn't know who these people are, but they all seem to think he's great. And so this is Neptunian. He's a snake oil salesman. So it's like he's willing to work that. And he does things like, we're going to take this city and turn it all emerald. And they're like, how are we going to do that? He's like, I've got these wonderful emerald glasses. And so they all put on glasses and they're to wear these glasses under lock and key. So all of a sudden the city is emerald. They don't understand that, like, the city's just the city. It's only emerald because they're wearing emerald glasses. And so he starts his kind of wizardry, which is really more, I got a trick up my sleeve type of thing. And he doesn't make personal appearances and fashions different creatures that represent him. One of them happens to be a head over a chair. Another is a ball of fire. Another one is a woman with wings. Another one is a snarling beast. And so this causes fear in people and wonder and awe. And the wizard is a great and powerful wizard. But he's ended up in a golden cage. He has to keep up the illusion of what he's doing because if he doesn't know what's going to happen to him, is it going to become a modern day French peasants marching on Versailles? Like the citizens of Oz going to rise against him, pillory him, or something along those lines. And so he has to keep up this act. He has to keep up this front, which he was doing pretty well until he lost to the Wicked Witch of the West and her flying monkeys. And he lost horribly in that battle and came home smarting from it. And she's the major threat to him. And that's where things are locked into place until Dorothy arrives. And he's heard that this is the kid who took out the Wicked Witch of the East, and he's going to send her off and take out the Wicked Witch of the West. Then he could deal with getting people their brains and hearts and back to Kansas later. A wizard is very moment-to-moment type of thing. Anyway, the reason I'm sharing this story with you is that one can become locked into a role. It can become locked into a job, or it becomes locked into a role in which there are very high expectations that are being made of you. And that can be like the Neptune part, like people glamorize it. They're convinced that you have the answers or that you're the best. And you may be feeling a bit of imposter syndrome behind all of this. You might be feeling a bit like, I'm not that person. Or maybe I was that person when I began, but I'm not that person anymore. And you might feel very disenchanted, or that you're locked into something and that you long to be free of it. These might be themes that are going through your life right now. And you might be feeling like it's impossible, that you have no choice but to stay here in this rut or in this situation. And what may happen during this period of time that Saturn is conjunct Neptune is that there may be a moment of exposure, okay? It could be a little girl from Kansas and her dog pulling back the curtain and you're exposed, or it could be the story of the emperor in his clothes, a kid pointing out that you're really naked or that you really don't know the things that you do or something like that. And there may be a feeling of being exposed, or your lack of passion being exposed, or the fact that you've been putting up a front feeling exposed, but something is going to be exposed. And you may feel like that's the end of the world, like, oh my God, like that's it. But at the same point, you might also see your way out of the situation that you're in. In this story, particularly in the book, the wizard has the balloon restored. And he's about to sail back to Kansas with Dorothy, and Toto jumps out to chase a cat, and Dorothy goes after Toto, and he sails away. But what you have here, or in that moment, is release. He gets to walk out. The wizard quits, okay? And he gets to walk out of this life that he's been living. And he wouldn't have had the gumption to reconstruct the balloon and take the balloon back from where he had come from if the exposure had not taken place. So sometimes it's the exposure that allows us to stop doing what we've been doing, or to stop telling ourselves that this is what we have to do to make ends meet. And that's what it takes. And then we're able to leave it behind. And so in there, with the themes of illusion, disillusionment, disappointment, exposure, these themes may work in such a way regarding a situation, maybe it's a job or a situation in your life where you feel very much tied up in it and you'd love to leave, but you can't. This exposure, this disillusionment, this reveal may be the very thing that releases you from it. And maybe the reveal isn't not so much other people finding out, but the reveal to yourself. The reveal of, like, I've been telling myself I had to do these things, and maybe I don't. And maybe I have a balloon in the back closet that I can blow up and leave all of this. And maybe in doing that, I may very well have regained my freedom and have once again direction of my own life and where I want to go with it. If you're born under Sagittarius, or you have Sagittarius rising, this Saturn Neptune conjunction in the zodiac sign of Aries is going to be a beneficial one for you. Now, the reason why it's going to be beneficial to you is because Sagittarius is a fire sign, just like Aries is a fire sign where this conjunction is taking place. So what that creates is a trine, or a bridge between these two zodiac signs. As I was saying earlier in this forecast, people born under Aries, for instance, which is a fire sign, just like you, when you have a conjunction of planets taking place in your own sign, it's taking place in you or at you. They're kind of in your face, for lack of a better way of putting it. There's no distance, there's no perspective on it. You can't help but feel like the planets are sitting on you, or maybe even have taken over your life. But when you have a trine by sign to that conjunction, like you do, you have some distance on it. You have some perspective on it. You can see what the planets are about. You can see what they're meant to do in your life. And this is something that's a good thing. You see where to go with this type of an energy. And so this particular conjunction takes on an inspiration type of energy in your life. You're going to be inspired by. And because the conjunction takes place in that part of your solar chart that deals with the heart, that deals with yourself, who you are, what you feel about yourself, what you enjoy, what you delight in, this is a very important place for this conjunction to be taking place. Now, remember that the Saturn and the Neptune are still going to carry along with it characteristics of illusion, disillusionment, disappointment, loss of belief or faith. But because they're in a trine, what this is all about is you leaving behind old beliefs about yourself, you putting aside things you've always told yourself or invested your energy in. And maybe those old beliefs just don't talk to you anymore. Maybe those things that you thought were the right things for you don't hold that for you anymore. Maybe you've lost yourself in the pursuit of faith or belief in yourself. There can be times in which we believe that something is so right for us that we're making ourselves do something that we don't really want to be doing. Or we can have an idea of ourselves which is not really who we are. Like I was sharing with you earlier in this forecast, that moment of disillusionment when the wizard is revealed to be a fraud, a con artist, and it looks like the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Lion aren't going to get their brains, heart, and courage, the wizard does something miraculous by actually saying you already have this. Now, if someone were to be told you already have this, you're really smart, the person is like, I'm not smart. I've got a long ways to go. I could improve things. So when the wizard in the film, for instance, gives the scarecrow a diploma, it's like when someone gets a PhD or has written their doctorate, they get something that says, hey, you're smart. Okay. Then the person is like, I'm smart. That's exactly what the wizard does with the scarecrow in the film. The Tin Woodman is hopeless to ever have a heart, and the wizard gives him a little heart medallion that he can pin to himself. And he sees the heart, and it's clicking and it's thumping, so he can feel it. He had always had that, but he needed a memento, something to say, you have this. And the lion, I think, gets a medal or a crown or something like that, and it makes him feel courageous, so now he's courageous. Well, he needed that medal or that crown to feel that way. These are just symbols. They're not the thing itself. But if there's a symbol that one can say, there's my doctorate, or I can hear my heart inside my chest, or I'm wearing this medal, that's like the evidence. And that's what leads them to believe in something they had all along. And this actually really talks about the wisdom of the wizard. It can be read on one hand as being his way of getting out of a fix or a tight corner, but it can also be him giving them like a trophy, which is only testifying to something that they had all along. And so that's an important Saturn Neptune conjunction moment that takes place there. But there's something else that's going on a deeper level, because the person who's not given something in this awarding of trophies and medals is Dorothy, because Dorothy's wish is to go back home. And she even says in the film, I guess there's nothing in Annie's, and that's when he's like, oh, I've got a balloon, we'll go in the balloon. And as we all know, she misses the balloon flight and is left destitute in Oz. What's been going on here? It's almost like the story behind the story, and something you might relate to with this Saturn-Neptune conjunction is that the brains of the scarecrow are really Dorothy's brains. The heart of the Tin Woodman is really Dorothy's heart. The courage of the lion is really Dorothy's courage. The scarecrow, the Tin Woodman, and the lion are external symbols of Dorothy. We're not told much about it. There's like a couple of more lines about it in the book version of The Wizard of Oz, but Dorothy is an orphan. Now, we're not told much about it, and the book says a little bit more about it, but the reality of Dorothy's situation is that Dorothy is an orphan. And so it's more than likely that Uncle Henry and Aunt Em have no blood ties to her at all. In fact, this is often what happened to orphan children at the turn of the 20th century. The book is written in 1899. It's published in 1900. A lot of orphans were fielded out, so to say, to different families who wanted a child. And so we don't know what happened to Dorothy's mother and Dorothy's father. All we know is that she's orphaned and that they're dead, and that she has taken up residence in Kansas with Uncle Henry and Aunt Em. And so there's clearly a trauma that's taken place. I mean, like, she's a kid. I think she's like 9 or 10 in the book. And she finds herself out in Kansas, which is depicted in the book as a very gray and rather even soulless place where nothing really grows. And then because of a result of this cyclone, she goes on this adventure. And if you were to look at it on a more psychological level, the cyclone could easily have been symbolic of the loss of her parents. This disaster happens where she loses her parents. She arrives in Oz and looks back and sees that her house has fallen on a woman, and the house is an image of home, and there's a woman's feet protruding out from under it, and that could be like a mother figure. It's the crushing of that, and perhaps the fragmentation of Dorothy. I mean, she doesn't go through a psychological fragmentation or something like that, but she's facing a life situation that is challenging whether she's smart enough, compassionate enough, and brave enough to get through it. And this is what her adventure in Oz brings about, is it's ultimately going to result in the integration of the Scarecrow and Tin Woodman and Lion, their stories, into her life. She's the vessel and also the protagonist of this whole adventure. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because you may be experiencing something similar in your own life. You might have gone through some difficult times recently, or you might have spent weeks, months, years maybe telling yourself that you weren't able, you weren't smart enough, maybe cared too much or cared too little. Maybe you weren't brave. Maybe there were expectations for you to be a person that you didn't think that you could be. Maybe you couldn't live up to those expectations in some way. Maybe people had personal expectations of you or professional expectations of you, and you might have felt like you couldn't live up to that. And Dorothy, by going on this adventure into Oz and forming these friendships and relationships, and also seeing that she's more resourceful, and also at different times being rescued herself, these are the things that really open up what begins as like a closed person at the beginning of this story. And so this might be something that you're experiencing, the loss of things you used to believe, the loss of maybe a childhood innocence, or maybe the loss of an anger or a hard-heartedness. The dissolution of these things might be opening up and freeing parts of who you are right now, so that you may find yourself evolving naturally and organically into that person you want to be. And I think perhaps the greatest realization here is that person that you want to be is who you were all along. And this is perhaps the greatest gift, this insight, this recognition is perhaps the greatest gift that the Saturn Neptune conjunction in Aries could possibly give. If you're born under Capricorn or you have Capricorn rising, the Saturn Neptune conjunction in Aries is taking place at the base of your solar horoscope. It's taking place in that part of your solar chart that deals with hearth, home, and family. And when you think of hearth, home, and family and the Wizard of Oz, you can't help but think of that line, "There's no place like home." And that probably is something that's very much on your mind these days, is the idea of home. What is home? And home is a huge theme in the story of The Wizard of Oz. At the beginning of Wizard of Oz, in the film at least, we see that Dorothy is living with her Uncle Henry, Aunt Em, on a farm somewhere in Kansas, and there's like 3 cowhams and some livestock and things like that. And she's bored and she's kind of lonely and she's yearning for something more colorful in her black and white world. At the beginning of the book, however, she is indeed living in Kansas with her Uncle Henry and her Aunt Em, but Dorothy is considerably younger in the book than she is in the film. But in the book, she's about maybe 9 or 10. We know in the book that she's been orphaned, that her mother and father have died, and we don't really know how they've died or been removed to her life. In the book, she's about maybe 9 or 10. We know that she's orphaned and that her mother died. We don't really know what happened to the father, but we know that her mother has died, maybe in childbirth, and Dorothy has been fielded out to Uncle Henry and Aunt Em, who are a childless couple living in Kansas. Now, at this period of time, which is the turn of the century into the 20th century, from the 19th into 20th century, which is when The Wizard of Oz is written, 1899 it's written, 1900 it's published, this idea of fielding out orphans to families without children was pretty much de rigueur. This is what was done. And so Dorothy doesn't really have a blood tie to Uncle Henry and Aunt Em. And in fact, at the beginning of the book, Aunt Em doesn't really know what to do with Dorothy. And what's fascinating is that Aunt Em herself was young and vigorous when she first married Uncle Henry. We learned that in the story. But the plainness of Kansas, the difficulty of trying to work out a living as a farmer has robbed Aunt Em of her color, of her youth, of her vivacity. So much so that at the different times when Dorothy squeals because she's playing with her dog Toto and Toto has made her laugh, Aunt Em is always like clutching her heart and she's like, oh my goodness. And so she's not used to the ring of laughter of a child. And this is the household that Dorothy is being raised in. Now, I'm sure they care about Dorothy, but it's not a particularly loving or animated or giving household that she finds herself in. It's a bit cold, not because it's austere, because Uncle Henry is a harsh disciplinarian. The household is austere because their circumstances are austere. Uncle Henry clearly isn't making that much money as a farmer and doesn't really have a lot to offer. And so when this cyclone appears on the horizon and it's coming towards the house, Uncle Henry rushes out to grab the cattle to shelter them in the barn. And he yells at Em to grab Dorothy and run on into the house. And they run into the house because in the house is a trapdoor that leads down into a cellar, okay, which is also fourth house. Fourth house, by the way, also rules cellars and things beneath the ground. And Em rushes down the steps first, but Toto jumps out of Dorothy's arms. Toto's always picking the most inconvenient moments to jump out of Dorothy's arms. But anyway, Toto jumps out of Dorothy's arms and hides under the bed. And Dorothy goes to get Toto. And it's in that moment that the house is pulled up out of its foundation and carried aloft into the cyclone itself. And what's magical about this moment, and this is the way that it's described in the book, the house isn't spun around in all sorts of wild and crazy directions. The house is almost cradled by the cyclone. That's actually how it's described. And it rocks gently back and forth at the top of the cyclone like a cradle would rock. And because there's wind blowing and hours have passed by, Dorothy eventually falls asleep. She's being cradled by this cyclone, and she falls asleep until she's woken up by a big bump because the house has landed in Oz. So this idea of home, of searching for home, becomes a big theme with Dorothy. She begins the story as a resident, really. It's a house that took her in as an orphan, these two elderly people who are now her parents, and she is separated by them. Her Aunt Em is safe down in the basement, but Dorothy isn't. So there's this kind of vulnerability to Dorothy that's going on, where she's facing lost mother figures throughout the story. Aunt Em is down in the cellar safe, and Dorothy is not. The house lands on the Wicked Witch of the East, and just that image of a broken home on top of a woman's legs underneath is almost symbolic of her own mother in some way. Like, did her mother die in childbirth? And has Dorothy carried guilt since? And the Wicked Witch of the West and her association with the West, sunset, and death is another mother image that comes around. So there's a lot of these themes that are going through The Wizard of Oz. And these might be themes that you recognize in your own life. You may be dealing with issues in your home or family in which you may feel in some way disconnected to what's going on, like you don't really belong, or you might even feel like your home life or your family life is changing in some fundamental way. I don't think it's going to be taking place in catastrophic way or anything along those lines, but it may be something in which it's more like, oh, this is the time when this changes in my life. This might be the time in life when I purchase a house or try to. This might be a time in life where I start a family. This might be a time in my life in which I'm raising children or saying goodbye to children because they're older and they're leaving the nest, where I'm coming back from the adventure to Oz. So this thing of home and the changes that are going on in the home, which again, I don't feel are catastrophic. I feel they're more like a change of life or a time in your life. These might be things that are resonating with you very deeply during this period of time of Saturn and Neptune being conjunct in the fourth house. That idea of a disillusionment. Let's say you're starting a family. Okay, you can have all these ideas of what it's like to start a family. You might want to do it just like your parents did, or you actually might want to do it in the exact opposite way of your parents. Maybe they weren't great parents. And you can have these ideas of what it's going to be, and you put expectations on yourself as a parent. That never compares to the reality of actually raising a family. And so that might be associated to the disillusionment or the anxiety that's associated with this Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Or maybe Let's say the kids are moving out or going off to college, or maybe they're even young teenagers and they don't want to hang out at home anymore. There's a change of life. There's a change of the makeup of your home that's taking place, that you might be feeling abandoned or taken for granted or left. So these might be feelings that are very strong and very powerful right now. And you might be telling yourself, these things happen. Everyone goes through empty nest syndrome or a divorce or a loss of someone, and you just like buck up and get your way through. But on a deeper level, there may be a real sense of personal loss, a real sense of what your roots were. You may be debunking things that you told yourself. Maybe you believed in the ultimate ideal family. Your family was absolutely ideal and loving or whatever. And maybe you're discovering sides of your family that, where you're seeing the cracks in the foundation. It wasn't so idealistic. It wasn't so wonderful. And maybe you're holding on to that. And family members are like, listen, wake up. That's not, who we are. And maybe you have to give up that image that you carried, or that want, or that hope, or that yearning for family that you carried. Or maybe the opposite. Maybe you went through a very difficult childhood, one that was hard, where you endured a lot of challenges and a lot of hardship. And maybe you're wanting to establish your own home right now. And maybe it's time to put away those scars. I mean, we carry scars and wounds, but they don't always have to be inflamed. They don't always have to rule over our way of looking at the world by making us suspicious or guarded or anything along those lines. You may find like you've reached a point in your life in which you might be saying, I'm tired of being the wounded child. I want my own home without all that psychological baggage. So that might also be something that's going on at this point. It's only by the cyclone picking up Dorothy's house and marooning her in Oz, pretty much, that Dorothy comes to realize how much she misses home. And at first it's like home, but then it becomes Aunt Em. There's Uncle Henry, but it's really Aunt Em whom she misses and wants to get back to. And she's worried what they're thinking about her and where she must be. And so by losing that, she wants to get back to home. And ultimately, as we know, she does. The silver slippers carry her home, and Aunt Em sees her and she's waving over the fields. And Dorothy, the last image of the book is that she's running across the field with Toto tucked under one arm back to her Aunt Em, who's like, oh my God, you're alive. But Dorothy's, as far as Dorothy's concerned, she's trying to get back too. But in reality, she's going home for the first time. That's what's going on here. Home is home now for her. Parent is Aunt Em now for her. Her bonding is that powerful. She wants to get back home because she wants to create her home. So that getting back home, turning into coming home, that's pretty much how I would read this conjunction of Saturn and Neptune at the base of your chart. And that feeling of making home your home. And we go through different times where our home changes, the people who occupy it or where we are financially and things like that. So this is a part where home really matters, where your family really matters at this time in your life right now. And this is a time where you truly will realize in your heart and in your soul that there really is no place like home. If you're born under Aquarius, or you have Aquarius rising, this Saturn-Neptune conjunction in the zodiac sign of Aries is going to be beneficial for you. Now, the reason for that is because Aries is a fire sign, and your sign, Aquarius, is an air sign. And fire and air naturally complement one another. In astrology, we have 4 elements: fire, air, earth, and water. The earth and water elements are seen as being the feminine elements or the yin energy elements. And the air and fire elements are seen as being the masculine elements or the yang elements. These are elements that act upon, that they are active and they are activated. And so they form a natural sextile to one another. A sextile is a wonderful relationship in astrology because it means that planets that are in signs that sextile one another are going to get together with one another to help each other out. They might have their differences. They might have another way of wanting to do things, but they're going to sit down and collaborate and work out their differences to their mutual benefit. So this is a wonderful thing. What also makes it wonderful is that Saturn is your traditional planetary ruler. As an Aquarius, you have two planetary rulers, Saturn and Uranus. Saturn is your traditional ruler. It's in the zodiac sign of Aries. Aries forms a natural sextile to Aquarius, and Saturn is the planet that's looking out after you. It's your ruling planet in astrology, one of two ruling planets. So what this does is that this makes Saturn an enabling energy, a supportive energy, even a guiding energy. Saturn is there to help you out. So it's not withholding from you. It's not just testing you. It's not just giving you a hard time or eating your lunch. Saturn is helping you to figure out your way, to figure out your path, where you want to go, and how you can be the best that you can possibly be. Indeed, the detrimental qualities of Saturn in Aries, qualities that would be very challenging, for instance, for someone born under Aries, become constructive for you. You get all of the Aries be the best that you can be, combined with Saturn as your ruling planet, helping you to figure out how you're going to make that happen. So there's very much a stepping up to the plate quality to this Saturn-Neptune conjunction. But in order to step up to the plate, in order to become the best that you can be, you have to get rid of certain assumptions, certain maybe misbeliefs about yourself. These might be things that you've been telling yourself, like you're not able to do this, or only you can do this, but by yourself, and you can't rely on anyone. We all carry certain beliefs that we have about ourselves, or things that we tell ourselves that aren't the most accurate things. And sometimes they can be very critical, and sometimes they can be detrimental to our own progress or growth as a person. Here, Saturn switches from a detrimental type of energy to, as I said, a constructive or a positive one. So I want you to think of the idea of stepping up to the plate of who you are, rising to the occasion of who you are. And in the story that I've shared with you today, which is the story of the Wizard of Oz, the wonderful Wizard of Oz, as it's known by its book title, there is a moment when people have to step up to the plate. This follows the moment where the wizard is exposed as a fraud, but yet he awards the Scarecrow his brains with a diploma, and he gives the Tin Woodman a heart, and he gives the lion either a crown or a medal of courage. And these are the things that make them feel like they really are the things that they wanted, even though they had these things all along. In other words, the Scarecrow was always smart. I mean, think of a doctorate student or someone who gets their PhD. They were always smart, but once they finish their doctorate, or once they get their doctorate or get their PhD, now they're told they're smart. Well, that's kind of the same idea that's going on here. The wizard might have been a fraud, but he recognizes that each of these three people have had these qualities all along. And he gives them basically trophies, little things they can carry around saying, I'm smart, or I'm loving, or I'm courageous, when in reality, they are those things all along. But at the end of the story, when everything is made right, and Dorothy, with her visit with Glinda, is going to be sent home, and so everything is going to turn out for the best, Glinda asks the Scarecrow, Tin Woodman, and Lion where they want to go. She's actually arranged for transportation. The flying monkeys are going to fly the Scarecrow, Tin Woodman, and Lion to wherever they want to go in Oz. And that's their last assignment before the flying monkeys are free and they go back to being a self-ruling people again. And so the Scarecrow says, well, I've been invited by the citizens of the Emerald City to become the new person in charge, the new president or the new governor of the Emerald City since the wizard has left. And Glinda's like, oh, that's good. And the Tin Woodman is like, and the Wicked Witch had imprisoned the Winkies. She was in charge of the kingdom of the Winkies and had enslaved the Winkies people. And now that the Wicked Witch has been destroyed, I've been invited to come and take over as the king of the Winkies. And Glinda's like, oh, that's a very good choice. And then the Cowardly Lion is like, now that I've got my courage, I've been invited by the animals of the jungle to become king. And I'm going to, because now I could roar really loudly. Glinda's like, oh, that's so wonderful. What great news. Okay, so Glinda just wants to make sure that everyone's got a place to go before she sends Dorothy back to Kansas. But what this talks about, what I want to share with you, is that now that the Scarecrow is smart, he's seen as a legitimate ruler of the Emerald City. Now that the Tin Woodsman is seen as compassionate, whereas the Wicked Witch of the West was the opposite, he's seen as a benevolent ruler of the land of the Winkies. And now that the Lion is seen as courageous, that he's not going to run and leave the people that he rules, he's made the king of the beasts. He's taken his rightful place. And that's what's happening here. As I said before, we can tell ourselves things which might not be the best beliefs or the way to think about ourselves that can keep us constrained. We can say we're not smart enough, or we're not loving enough, or we're not brave enough. And that may not be true. And this period of time when Saturn and Neptune are forming a conjunction, they may be disabusing you of some of these notions. They may be showing you that, guess what? You really are smart and much smarter than you think. Or guess what? You really do have compassion for people. That's why you feel so badly when you have to make decisions that might upset somebody else. Or guess what? You really do have courage. Your courage doesn't come from standing up for other people. Your courage comes from you being a person who's going to stand up for other people. So this centeredness in your own authority and in your own ability is something that, by virtue of this sextile, the Saturn-Neptune conjunction is going to bestow upon you. It's going to get you to realize, to recognize, and to see. So instead of pretending to be someone that you're not because you haven't lived up to certain expectations or demands, or even the self-criticism you've imposed upon yourself, this Saturn-Neptune conjunction, by debunking some of these myths and stories you've told yourself about yourself, is actually going to allow you to grow into the person you were always meant to be and probably always were all along. If you're born under Pisces or you have Pisces rising, this Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries is taking place at a very profound part of your own solar chart. Now, Neptune, as you may already know, is one of your two planetary rulers. If you're born under Pisces or you have Pisces rising, you're one of the three zodiac signs that has two planetary rulers. You're ruled by both Jupiter and Neptune. So in this case, Neptune has just recently entered the zodiac sign of Aries. I talked about that a little bit in the previous episode, and that by Neptune leaving Pisces, where it's been for the last 13 years, and where it's naturally ruled over you, you've gone from a watery temperament to, now that Neptune has moved into Aries, a more fiery temperament. Now, that doesn't mean that you're all of a sudden hollering at people and making dramatic scenes in restaurants or anything along those lines. What it means is that you're getting that confidence that fire signs naturally have. And the fire signs are Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. No other element, and we have 4 elements in astrology: water, earth, air, and fire. No other element places such a high value on individuality, on being yourself, who you are, and making a difference in other people's lives like the fire signs do. And with Neptune in Aries, there's going to be a sense or feeling like you matter, like you're present rather than being absent or absentee, that you matter, that you make a difference in the lives of other people. Now, the part of the Oz story that I want to share with you that I think mirrors this best is, as we began the forecast, we began with the reveal, with the wizard, with Dorothy and Scarecrow and Tin Woodman and Lion realizing that the wizard was a fraud, that they had vanquished the Wicked Witch of the West, come back with her broom, and that the wizard couldn't keep the promises that he had made, that maybe it was a stalling tactic or something where he didn't even think they were going to come back from it, and they did. And so the wizard actually is able to give the Scarecrow brains, Tin Woodman heart, and Lion courage, because they had those qualities all along. Anyone who can talk like the Scarecrow talks, scarecrows usually don't talk, but who can talk and outwit like the Scarecrow does, obviously has brains. And anyone who has the sensitivity and compassion that the Tin Woodman openly displays clearly has a heart. And anyone who can roar, even if he's frightened, he makes a point of roaring louder than anyone else to frighten them away so they don't see how much he's frightened, has courage. They just need trophies. They just need things that say that. And in the film, the Scarecrow is given a diploma where he recites, I think, Einstein's theory or something like that. And the Tin Woodman is given a heart that he can feel beating, and now he knows he can love again. And the Cowardly Lion is given a medal that makes him feel courageous and very proud, and so he can feel proud again. And so they're each given kind of trinkets or trophies that attest to qualities that they already had. The person who is not given something like this because her request is to be returned home to Kansas is Dorothy. That's more problematic. But as we learn from the story of the wizard, he was once a snake oil salesman who went up in a balloon over a circus and was delighting and amazing people below. And an updraft of wind broke the line to the circus, and the balloon flew up into the sky with the wizard in it, the gondola, the basket, and it flew over the desert that separates our world from Oz, and he lands in Oz and becomes the wizard. And so it's that same balloon that he says to Dorothy, I'm going to take you back and we'll fly back over the desert and you'll be home. And an accident happens. Toto jumps out of Dorothy's arms and chases a cat, and Dorothy goes after Toto, and the balloon departs without her. So we are left in this very miserable scene. Okay, we're left with this heartbroken scene. And in the book, it's much more heartbreaking than in the film because Dorothy really has nothing to turn to. The balloon is left. She's been abandoned in Oz, and she doesn't know where to turn. And Dorothy rarely, if ever, breaks down in the story. She's a real staunch kid, but she is beside herself with despair and with tears. And it's at that moment that the guardsman to the Emerald City says to Dorothy, well, there is someone you can turn to. And Dorothy's like, who? And the Scarecrow and Tin Woodman and Lion are like, who? And he said, there is a good witch of the South, and her name is Glinda. And you can go to her, and she will definitely be able to help you. And they're like, really? And he's like, yeah, but you're going to have to find your way there. And so they're given directions, and they go on even more adventures than they did between getting from Munchkinland to the Emerald City. But at last they arrive the kingdom of Glinda. And Glinda is Venusian. She's guarded by an army of women, and actually they're girls, and they salute her, and she's this amazing sorceress. And she actually even has a book of records that she opens, and there's a magic pen that transcribes all the events that are taking place in Oz. And Glinda has actually been following the adventures and the travails and tribulations of Dorothy and her friends the entire time. So she's completely aware of what's gone on. And so Dorothy's like, how can you help me? And she's like, well, that's easy. You've been carrying the answer, the solution with you all along. And she's like, I have, what is it? How can I get home? And she's like, your silver slippers that you're wearing. And she's like, these? And she's like, yes, your silver slippers can take you home, and they could have taken you home at any point. And Dorothy's like, well, why didn't anyone tell me? And Glinda's like, because you had to find out for yourself is why. And she's like, well, how can they take me home? And she's like, you click them 3 times and you say, I want to go home, and you'll be there in an instant. And Dorothy's like, really? Like that? And then she stops and she looks at the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman and the Lion, and she just stares at them because she registers for the first time that she's going to be leaving them. And Glinda intercedes, and she says, well, it's time to say your goodbyes before you go. And is there anything that you want to say to Dorothy? And she asks that to each one of them, Scarecrow, Tin Woodman, and Lion. And in the book it's so beautiful, because the Scarecrow says to Dorothy, I know you want to go home, and home is where you belong, but I just want to tell you, without you, I would have still been hanging in a cornfield looking at crows who are never scared of me. And I would never have known that I could get off that staff that I was stuck to, that I could get out and see the world and make friends and conversations. I would never have known those things if not for you. And the Tin Woodman says to Dorothy, if not for you, I would still be rusted. outside my home, and I could have been there till the end of all time, as far as I know. No one would have discovered me in the deep, dark wood like you had. And you brought me back to life. And you taught me what it was like to have a heart again. And I would never have had those things without you. And the lion says, Dorothy, without you, I would have still been frightened. I would have been hiding behind trees in the forest. And I would never have known that I could be courageous. And I would never have known that I could be the king of the beasts that I was supposed to be, that I could face these perils and stare down obstacles. I would never have known any of this without you. And it's a beautiful moment. And it's a moment that I want to share with you because it's a moment in which Dorothy realizes for the first time what a personal difference she's made in each one of their lives. She was the one who talked to the scarecrow, and because the scarecrow had someone to talk to for the first time and helped him down and said, come along with me, and maybe, I don't know if the wizard's going to give you brains or not, but you might as well find out. She was the one who took out the oil can and got the hinges moving again for the Tin Woodsman so that he could be a person again. He could be mobile again. And she was the one who had faith in the lion when the lion never had faith in himself. And so she made a personal difference in the lives of each one of them. And that's something that as a Pisces, it's important for you to understand. And it's something that I think you may come to recognize more now that Neptune is moving through Aries. You make a difference in people's lives. At times you might feel invisible, or you might feel like you're unrecognized, or you might feel like people just don't care. But the fact of the matter is, you make that difference in people's lives. You're the one who believes in them, in people when they don't believe in themselves. You're the one who offers a shoulder to lean on when they feel despondent. You're the one who laughs alongside them and cries alongside them and is there beside them. And as a Pisces, you can have a tendency to see yourself as not being around or not being present or maybe not even making much of a difference. And that's why what's important about this Saturn Neptune conjunction is that you see that you do make a difference and that you honor that in yourself, that you recognize that in yourself. Dorothy learns that she had the means to take herself home all along. And a big question that people always ask in the movie is like, well, why didn't they tell her earlier? But the thing is, she had to go on this journey. She had to make a difference in people's lives and meet people who would make a difference in her life. Because before all of this, she was just a plain girl who delighted in the company of her dog, but didn't really have many high hopes for herself or anything along those lines. Her world was a very narrow one. But now, as a result of her journey and her adventures and her friendships and the different sacrifices and redemptions, she's enriched. She's made fuller as a person. She's also made fuller as a person by the people in her life. But the greatest gift that she could give them was making a difference in their lives, because without her, they would never have become what they became. And Dorothy would never have found her way home or gone back home again without her wanting that, without her recognizing the difference that she makes in Uncle Henry's life and the difference that she makes in Aunt Em's life. She is valued and she is loved. And this is something that I want you to think about when Saturn conjoins Neptune on February 20th.